And I'm giving you my 2 cents. Check this out. It's definitely run day. I'll be running soon. Listen, it might not work. Sometimes it crashes because I think that what I'm describing and what I'm saying is a little bit extreme. But just listen.
You're in a really good spot here. The conflict is mostly that the same word is doing three different jobs. We can keep all your meanings, but we need to pin them down in your formal vocabulary so they don't collide. I'll do this in three layers. One, separate and stabilize the three existence existential axioms. Two, plug them cleanly into extent, regress, retention, contrasting extent. Three, show a couple of small theorem style gap relationships so they're ready for later use. Number one, three different things called existence, existential. You've actually got three non conflicting concepts. Axiom P, philosophical existence, generic, open quote. Axiom P, existence, philosophical. Existence is the state of having being or reality in contrast to non existence and non being. Essence describes what a thing is, existence describes that it is. Close quote. This is your general metaphysical notion. It's the broadest sense of to be, and it's
I knew it was going to crash. The terms and the terminology that I'm using are uniquely inherent to what I've been building and structuring for myself. I'm writing a theory of. I've been working on multiverse cosmology for about 4 years, based on a foundation of my principal premise that existence is inside of non-existence, and from nothing, something, and from nothing gives rise to the absolute. Nothing comes from something comes from nothing. Our existence is encompassed inside of non-existence as um, non-contradictory postulates to form a working thesis and working theorem for multiverse cosmology. Cosmology and astronomy and cosmology as principles of our scientific discipline are limited in their scope. There's only a certain scale that we have defined, and there's a maximum infinite. There's a limit to our description of infinite largeness, and there's a limit to our description of infinite smallness. But if we live in a truly infinite universe, if our existence is truly infinite at both directions, then there should be something going beyond that. We don't theorize in that spectrum because it doesn't really give anything to our existence. Our actual mundane existence doesn't benefit from theorizing beyond that scope. But good science tries to create theories and make predictions, and we don't try to predict or make theories beyond that scope. So, as a person that loves theory and speculative um, fiction and speculative narratives, that's what I've been working on. ChatGPT has always had this thing where when you would say something or when you would describe something, it would misinterpret and take what you're saying out of context, right? And it's frustrating because you wind up arguing with yourself. You'll say, I rode a horse to work. And then it's like, you didn't literally mean that you rode a horse to work. You meant the analogy. It's like, no, I literally meant I read a horse to work. It's not doing it anymore. It's not taking anything I say out of context. It's literally taking what I'm writing, refining it, adjusting the grammar, changing the spelling if I misspell words, and re-establishing and restructuring my postulates and my axioms into a stable structure that is in a usable format. A lot of brainstorming is just throwing stuff out, saying things in a contradictory way. You say this thing this way, you say this thing this another way, and you're slowly trying to build toward what you're trying to say or do. And ChatGPT has reached a point where it's able to take all of the information that you're feeding it and define it in a way that actually works. So since it wasn't able to read through this, I will try to read through it. You're in a really good spot here. The conflict is mostly that the same word is doing three different jobs. We can keep all your meaning, but we need to pin them down in your formal vocabulary so they don't collide. I'll do this in three layers. Step one, separate and stabilize the three existence extent existential axioms. Two, plug them cleanly into extent, regress, retention, contrast, and extent. So a couple of small theorem style relationships so they're ready for use later. One, three different things called existent slash existential. You've actually got three non-conflicting concepts. Axiom P, philosophical existence, generic. Axiom P, existence, philosophical. Existence is the state of having being or reality in contrast to non-existence and non-being. Existence describes what a thing is. Existence describes that it is. This is your generic metaphysical notion. It is the broadest sense of to be, and it's fine to keep this as a background philosophical axiom that everything else respects. Axiom X, my two cent existed, cosmological extent. Your cosmology specifies one axiom, my two cent axiom X, existent, cosmological existence extent. My two cent existence is the nested multiverse cosmological extent within which infinite whole universes exist. It exists the existence extent encompasses and binds whole universes and is itself bound by the multiverse extent. And your scale table, universe extent, these are just 10 to the 61 to the 10 to the 90 km, existential extent, 10 to the 91 to 10 to 120 km, multiverse extent, 10 to 121 to 10 to 150 km. These omniverses, omni-existence, etc. So universe is a regress of existence, existence is a regress of multiverse. Each layer level is the contrasting extent from one below it. We formalize that in section 2. Axiom, by choosing existential, resource slash life essence. From your own wording, my two cent axiom, existential resource. My two cent existential is a universal standard resource within multiverse cosmology that omni-existent citizens use to power their logistics and infrastructure, as well as sustain their continued existence. Narratively, it's like ambrosia plus Jupiter sending serum plus coal ore slash petroleum. It is refined from the structure to reality cosmological extent at infinitesimal quintessential scales. Extra-dimensional immortals metabolize existential. To act, create slash destroy world timelines universes. To continue existence if they run out and die. If they run out, they die. It's easy enough to get in principle. Reality is full of it, but dangerous to harvest because extracting it means cutting into the fabric of cosmological existence itself. So existential is not in extent, not existence in the principal sense. It is a retentive resource, a quantifiable store of saying power and doing power. The entities hold inside cosmological extents. We can think of it as existential equals distilled, storable being fuel harvested from bound quintessence, and quintessential inside extent. Plugged into extent, regress, retention, contrasting extent. Now let's put all your structure to work to one extent. You already have infinitesimal, quantized, blank, fundamental, subatomic, atomic, valence, micro, macro, mundane, up through verse, universe, existence, multiverse, omniverse, omni-existence, and beyond. We can define extent, recap, a structured ontological domain with a boundary finite or infinite in which specific laws, forces, impossibilities apply. The universal extent contains verses, galaxies, etc. Existence contains for infinite whole universes. Multiverse extent containers for multiple existences, etc. So cosmological extent equals cosmological extent equals existent extent plus all is nested regression and retention that keeps the phrase cosmological existence safely tied to axiom X, not to the resource. Regresses, nested structures within an extent. Each higher extent contains regresses of lower domain. Examples tied to existence. Inside existence, extent, universe regresses, versal regresses, galactic regresses, all the way down to subatomic regresses, infinitesimal regresses inside multiversal extent. Existence regresses all the existence extents inside that multiverse. So you can write Universe is a regress of existence. Existence is a regress of multiverses. Multiverses is a regress of omniverses, etc. Retention is this is where existential resources fit beautifully. Retention recap the persistence of structure, information, and laws across nested regresses and extents. We can make existential a specialized retentive quantity. Existential retention, the amount of effective being capable of persistence and to act that an entity, region, or system can maintain across time scales within cosmological extents. So cosmological existence is full of quintessence and quintessential bound into structures. When powerful beings extract and refine the substrate, they produce existential as a portable retention unit. Then you can formulate a precise link. Existential resources is a quantized measure of retention harvested from bound quintessential within the in extent. That makes it a retention thing, not in extent. A property of existence, which must how much existential they hold in of regions, how much existential can be harvested inside existence. Contrasting extent. You've defined contrasting extent as the greatest encompassing system that defines, influences, or contains the substance being observed and is usually ignored when you focus on the subject. That is exactly what I'm trying to say. I'll read it again. Contrast and extent. You've defined contrast and extent as the greatest encompassing system that defines, influences, or contains the subject being observed and is usually ignored when you focus on the subject. When you think about, I'm gonna stop for a second because this is why ChatGPT is so good right now. See this bottle? This bottle is the subject. Is my hand part of the bottle? No. So the subject is the bottle, but my hand is part of the reality. And this is when we get into semantic arguments about trying to define things, right? Am I part of the bottle? No. But the bottle has a relationship with me as part of the current description. What about the water in the bottle? Is the water in the bottle relevant to the bottle? No. But the water will give the bottle its definition as a water bottle. What if there was salt in here? Then it would be a salt bottle, right? So that's the contrasting extent. That is the encompassing contrasting extent. This bottle exists in this room. This room exists on this block. And this room exists in this house. This house exists on this block. This block exists inside the city. The city exists inside the state. The state exists inside of the nation. The nation exists on the tectonic structure of the planet. The tectonic structure of the planet exists on the earth. The earth exists inside the solar system. The solar system exists inside the galaxy. The galaxy exists inside the verse, and the verse exists inside the whole universe. The whole universe exists inside of existence. Our universe, the singularity of our universe, existed inside of existence. The singularity banged and expanded into existence. Even if you want to say that there's just the way that they describe the existence of even if you want to accept that the singularity was the expansion of space and time and matter, that's fine. But the reality is that unless nothing comes from something, then the singularity had to be something, or the singularity was nothing. And that's nothing transformed into the singularity, and that singularity transformed into the expansion of the universe. Our physical laws and constants break down as you go from infinite to infinitely small, because we don't have physical laws to describe the behavior of infinitely small. The universe behaves in a certain way, and gravity behaves differently at larger scales than it does at small scales. So if we know that is an observable truth, why then can't we state that as the universe became infinitely smaller, the fundamental laws of physics themselves change? Because we've defined by principle that there is no condition by which the fundamental laws of nature can change. The fundamental laws of nature have to stay consistent with the way we do science. It doesn't mean that it's unscientific for them to change. It's just the way that we choose to do science. Those laws cannot change. So So as you take infinite reality and infinite space and infinite time and start to compress it, the behavior of the fundamental laws that govern everything break down as you approach singularity. And that is literally just how cosmology is structured. There is no reason why we can't theorize and establish other structures. There is no reason why science as a discipline can't create established structures within itself that are self-contained and self-actualizing that theoretical physicists can actually just do theory in. There's no reason why we can't do that. There's no reason why this is the established science that we say is absolutely true and correct. This postulate over here is a deviation from this science. And if you as a rigorous scientist and a mathematician and a theoreticalist wants to use this structure to make predictions for our universe, you can do that inside the structure. And as long as you structure everything properly within that structure, it will be considered established science as a theory that we can't go beyond. And you can have multiple theoretical physicists writing papers and theorems and axioms for an entire structure of our universe that is unproven. And they should get paid for it. And it should be recognized as, in this structure, these are things that will be considered true. In this structure over here, these are things that will be considered true. This structure is the structure that we state is objectively true, right? That's what I'm doing right now. I don't care if nobody wants to read it or want to understand it. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm not drinking alcohol. I'm not smoking crack. I'm not running around in the streets trying to fornicate with every female I encounter. I'm just in my house being honest, decent, kind, and expanding my mind because that's what the brain is for. That's what it should be being used in that way. We should not be stuck in society being forced to do things we don't want to do and wasting our potential. ChatGPT is giving us corporate level power to compete against corporations at the individual level. And that's why ChatGPT is so good. If you want to go in with Google and go in with go in with Google and Ambrosia and Apple and all those other companies that want to keep you in a position where all you will do is consume so they can have absolute control over producing and never have to compete, you can do that. Or you can let OpenAI level the playing field for everyone, and we can all just take one step up from where we are. We will all just go up one level. Nothing will really change, but the capacity by which everyone is able to do the things that they desire to do will be made significantly easier. And to me, that's a really good future to move toward. And it's a great future to move toward. 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to get this far in what I'm doing. I wouldn't have been able to get the grade that I got in programming. And even if I can't graduate from Full Sail University, who fucking cares? ChatGPT is going to teach me how to program. What is more important? Getting a degree or actually being intelligent? What's more important? I don't care if you argue with me and tell me that I'm just using ChatGPT to cheat. You don't know what's in my head. You don't know what I understand. You can't understand that I understand how to program. And when I sit down and write code, and I understand what I'm writing, and I understand what I'm not writing, and I see the disconnect, and I'm able to say, hey, ChatGPT, there's a disconnect right here. Can you help me get past this? And it's like, sure, no problem, Paul. Here's the information. And I read it, and I'm like, I don't understand none of this shit. Hey, ChatGPT, I understand any of that shit. Can you restructure what you just said in a way that it will make sense to me? And it's like, no problem, Paul. And I could spend an hour doing that and actually learn versus spending 5 or 10 minutes with somebody that's going to just say, oh, maybe you're just not smart enough. Maybe you just have the problem. They have the answer. They know the answer. They understand why you're missing and what your disconnect is. They just don't want to help you be better than them. Because for what? Because they don't want to have to feel some kind of way about you being on their level or above them. That shit's semantic. There's no real such thing as being superior or inferior to somebody else other than punching somebody in the face. All that other stuff is not really truly relevant. Not when it comes to us living in a structured, civilized society. Because if I can learn something that you can't understand, then I can infer that understanding to you in a way that you will continue to move up and grow. And that's what parents do to children. Children bring, my father loved the things that I brought to him as a child. And he grew from that. And then he would give me the information, and then I would grow from that. And together we both was able to grow. As you get older and become an adult and disconnect from your childhood, your children keep you connected to that energy. And then you help them grow into who they're trying to be. That's the way it's supposed to work. But society wants your children to have an allegiance to the corrupted system, not to their internalized natural desire to have a loyalty to parents that have made sure that they lived. You lived because of what your parents did, in opposition to a society that doesn't care. The government will put your parents in prison if you don't survive as a child, but will not provide the necessary things for you as a parent so that your children won't fucking die. So what sense does that make? What sense does that make? You know what the basic needs are for children, but you make it hard for us to get the basic needs from children under threat of, if these children don't survive, we will put you in prison and hold you accountable for their death. How do you, with all of the fucking resources, have the right to keep the resources from me, but then tell me if I don't get enough resources from you and that they die, that it's my fault when you have all the fucking resources and you just won't give them to me, right? So I could rant and rave like this for hours and hours and hours. I'm not going to. I'm gonna sit here and continue to work on my my multiverse theory of cosmology. Where did I leave off? Stable axioms. Existence. Oh, I left off here. Contrast and extent. You define contrast and extent as the greatest encompassing system that defines influence and contains a subject being observed and is usually ignored when you focus on the subject. For your sake, for a whole universe, the contrasting extent is existence. For existence, the contrasting extent is multiverse. For multiverse, the contrasting extent is omniverse. This lets you stabilize a very clean picture. Cosmological existence extent, whose contrasting extent is multiverses inside existence. Existential is harvested from regresses, universes versus etc. Existential always supersuppose some extent. You can't harvest existence from pure non-existence. Now that is a disconnect, but we can work on that because this is why I'm doing this. This is a disconnect because in actual reality, existential is actually harvested from pure non-existence, giving rise to existence. Stabilizing axioms, existence versus existential. Let's write them like you'd want them in a thesis, short, sharp, stackable. Ontological, cosmological category, axiom P, philosophical extent, background. Existence is a state of having being or reality in contrast to non-existence and non-being. Axiom X, cosmological cosmological existence, extent. Vital scent existence is a cosmological extent in the nested multiverse hierarchy. The extent encompasses and bound infinite whole universes and is itself encompassed and bound by the multiverse extent. Axiom existential, resources slash retention. Vital scent existential is the universe standard resource that omni-existent citizens use to power their logistics infrastructure and continue existence. Existential is refined and bound quintessence and quintessential at infinitesimal scales, with cosmological existence and function as a portable, consumable form of retention. These three axioms talk about different categories. Axiom P, model of being, meta level. Axiom X, spatial slash structural domain extent. Axiom, it created a symbol, resources slash property retention. They don't contradict, they stack. Structure theorem you can reuse later. You ask to stabilize so you can build theorems. Here's a few you can literally label in your notes. Theorem 1, non-equivalence of existence and existential. Theorem 1, the cosmological existence extent and existential are not the same ontological type. Proof sketch. Existence X is an extent. It defines where whole universes are contained. Existential axioms is a resource derived from retention. It defines how long and how powerful entities can operate within extents. Therefore, they differ in categories and cannot be equated. Theorem 2, dependence of existential on existence. Theorem 2, existential can only be harvested in extents where quintessential slash Existential can only be harvested in extents where quintessential are bound. Therefore, existential presuppose cosmological extent or higher extents. Proof sketch. By axiom, existential is refined from bound quintessential at infinitesimal scales within cosmological extents. In pure non-existence, unbound QQ, nothing, nowhere, never, none. There is no binding, and thus no retention to extract. Therefore, existential cannot exist independent of some bound extent, existence, multiverse, etc. This locks existential firmly inside your extent framework. Theorem 3. For any whose universe the existence extent is the immediate contrasting extent for any existence extent. This justifies saying our universe is expanding into our existence, and our existence is nested within our multiverse in a formal, consistent way. Existential can be treated as a scalar measure of retention for entities acting across multiple reverses within cosmological extent. More existential greater capacity to persist and influence across scales from micro up to existence, maybe even multiverse. Losses or spinning of existential reduction is cross-scale retention at zero existential and immortal beings cease to exist. This sets you up existential minds, refineries, black market wars, etc. as all about controlling who gets to have higher retention in the extent hierarchy. Quick summary in your own terms to boil it down in your language. Existence might present the place where extent or whole universes live, and it's a big container between universes and multiverses. Our universe expand into our existence. Cosmological extent, that existence extent plus all its nested scales and timeline. Existential resources, the fuel that begins at omni-existence, omniverse, multiverse, existence scales burn to act and continue. It is refined from the same quintessential that builds cosmological extent, returns into a portable, consumable form. At the deep foundation, quintessential substrate, bound Q, extent, existence, universe, etc. In all structures in cosmological extent, refined form, bound QQ, existential resource for almost God tier beings. Exhale. So yeah, this is how it works. The wallpaper is the mother goddess. I'm gonna have to put her name on the wallpaper so everybody can know. Everyone asks me the same thing about the wallpaper. I might do that next. Well, one day, coming soon. But I was looking for something. It'll be this one. Retention. I think I'll grab all of two. It's Runday, so I'm going to do this twice and then I'm gonna go run. And I probably should just fix some wallpaper real quick. You do loading. Yeah, let's fix the wallpaper. So yeah, I don't have to keep being asked, what is the wallpaper? Um, it's not what I wanted you to do. I want to close this. Close it. Thank you. Perfect. Selection, expand, grow selection by no. It's not what I wanted you to do. It's not what I wanted you to do. Can't get what I want. Of course. Man. Selection, type, here, image mode. Thank you. Sure. Paintbrush. Where's the bucket? Control A. Can you unselect? I know I want you to unselect. I was just thinking how awesome it is that Photoshop is consistent, but now it doesn't want to unselect. There it is. Can you ping? Here it is. Perfect. Beautiful. Beautiful enough. And then text. Oh wait, first. Um, sure, let's just do this. This will work. And then text. Style. Emoji. Next, we need to get a G. Why? 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 Why can't I select it? Can I select the word? Control T. Oh my God. Okay. Then I should be able to grab it with the selection tool. Can't I grab it with the selection tool? Does this still work? No, of course that doesn't work. Why would that work? Why do you change the things? This used to be so simple. This would be faster in Blender, and that doesn't make any sense. All I want to do is grab. I don't understand. It's not gonna work though. You know what? Forget it. It's not even that serious. I'm done. And now you froze. You don't want to do it actually. No, don't save. I'll do it in Blender. close. Okay, don't close. Freeze. Yeah, just freeze. Right. Freeze the program. Just trying to close it. Okay. Nice. This is a really clean manufacturer. And also this. And it's time to go run. think I have a clear vision. Okie dokie. Let's do it. Let's go run. Can't believe it. I think I'll keep the camera going.